So it's part 2 of our lesson 12. So we're back with our mean stack application. So we've written a click handler on our edit button. We've written a select book method in our component and a select book method in our service. The last thing we need is a get book method in our Express API. So let's open up our API route. And in here, we're going to write another get. We're going to use a get handler at our root URL with a parameter, an ID parameter on the end. Instead of finding all the books, we just want to find the book with the selected ID. So we'll call book dot find one, or we could call find by ID. Either one would work. We call find one. So we're passing in the ID parameter and setting it equal to the ID property. So this will allow us to look up that one book. It will get back, as usual, an error or a book object. So we'll do the same error handling. We'll return an error response in JSON. Otherwise, we'll just call res.json book. Well, let's see. HTTP status. Look at all our status codes here for 200. So we could either do it as 200. Yeah, we probably just do 200. Why not? So if we click our edit button now and things work, our form should get populated. Because in our component, our select book calls the service, which calls the API, and then we are binding, calling all of our properties are bound to the response. And our inputs are connected to those properties with ng model. Let's see what happens. So now when I select, it automatically populates our form, and notice our button turns to update. If I wipe out the ID, it goes back to add. So we can probably hide this now. We know that it's working. Any book I select automatically populates our form with all the right values. So on my books HTML, I'm going to add a type equals hidden to that button. So on my ID, we'll add We'll make it hidden. There's no need to see the ID in the form, but we still want to use it so we know which button should be visible. Now there's only one problem. What if I don't want to edit it and I just want to clear out my form? I have no way of doing it now. So what feature should we add so we can clear the form? Yeah, maybe we'll put a reset button here. We already have a clear form method. Our reset button could just call that method. So if we start editing something and then decide, no, I don't want to do this, we can just reset the form. So let's add one more button here. So on click, we'll call our clear form method. We already wrote that as a separate function that nulled out all of the book properties. We'll try that now. Oh, I guess I don't need an offset here. We can probably put it right beside. So when I reset, sort of worked. Why is our, let's go and check out our, yeah, first of all, I'll take out the offset. We'll just put it right beside add or update. And in our clear method, right, we also need to clear out the ID. So now reset clears the form and brings our add button back, hides our edit button. So we only need to write 6 more functions, folks, in the next 35 minutes, 45 minutes, right? We need our update in our component, our service, and our API, and then we need our delete in our component, our service, and our API. So 3 versions of update, 3 versions of delete. Maybe we'll do delete first. It's quick.
But in the table we have the hidden ID, and when we click edit, it changes that column into like a form. Then we don't have to get the book again.
Yeah, you know what? I mean, it's a fair point. We really, I suppose we don't really need to go to the database to get the book, do we? I mean, when we select, we already have the book here. So when we select it, I suppose we could just pass in the book, the whole book object itself. That's probably a lot more efficient, isn't it? Right. We don't have to call and go through the API to the database, considering the book is already displayed on the page with all the values. True? Well, let's think about it. If we just passed in a book object,
Yes, that will work, but if you convert that, then you can give this button to update, and it will update the book here only.
well, if we took this code out, if we just passed in a book object, we could just set the properties here without calling our service. We'll just see for fun what happened. If we passed in the whole book, we may actually get the same result.
What he was trying to point was like, if you go to the web page, when you click on the edit button, in a row, it changes to update button, and the fields in front of it changes to form. So you can edit the book right there. You don't have a separate form.
You could certainly do that. In my experience, I've done that in the past. In my experience, editing inline forms within tables is very messy because typically the data gets too large and then your form scrolls horizontally off the page. It's also much harder to display validations because you have no place to display messages. So yes, you could edit it and put a form right in the grid if you like. Nothing wrong with that. I've found in it, from my experience, from a usability perspective, they're very poor. Functionally, does it work? Yes. Is it usable? Not in my opinion. Sorry, I don't understand the question.
After update, it will go to the last, or will it stay there?
No, it should stay there. It stays there. So we could really do either of these. This is a lot more efficient. We already have the book data, so there's probably no need to go and fetch it all from the database. It's already here. And perform better. So we just passed in the book, the whole book, and just populated the properties of our current book in our component. We probably don't need to call the service for this. I realize we wrote a method. I do want to leave the method in my API though. What's the benefit of having this get method in our API? Yeah, because some other application could still look up and retrieve a particular book by the ID by continuing to keep this method in our API. So you probably don't need the method in the Angular service. We don't need to call it. So, okay, we'll do the update method. We'll need an update. So we've said that when the user clicks the update button, it calls update book. So we need to write that method in the component, in the service, and then we need a different method in our server-side controller that we haven't used before. And again, our update will take in a book parameter. Sorry, no, we don't need a parameter here. We can just we'll fill the object from the form. Oh, whoops, sorry. I'm mixing up title and author. So it now binds again to whatever's in our form. And now we want to pass this to our service and call update in the service. So after we update it, after we send this update off to the service, what things should happen on our form? What else should we do? Okay, so we'll call this dot clear, and we should do one other thing. Yeah, we want to refresh the list so the updates are reflected in our HTML table. So we'll call get. Now it's complaining here because our service doesn't have an update method yet. We'll do that in a minute. So we'll fill our book object from the form, call our service, pass the form values, clear out the form, and refresh. Notice it's not refreshing the whole page. We are actually manually updating parts of the page. Here we update the form, and here we update the data in our HTML table.
I don't know whether it's right or not. Should we don't display the ideal event or as the hidden? We just store in this class and then use it.
We could, but we're also using it to determine, we have to bind something to it because we're using it to know which button to show. There are probably some other ways of doing this, but I'm going to do it this way for now. So now our book service needs an update method. Accepts a book parameter. Because we're doing a post, we need the headers. So we'll take the headers from our ad and use them. Now this time we're going to use a different method in our API. What method is commonly used for doing updates? It's not get and it's not post. Not update. Usually the HTTP method for update is put. So we're going to run a put method. You can see them all here. Patch is also sometimes used for update. Excuse me. So we'll call put at /API. And again, we need to append on the ID. Actually, we probably don't have to append on the ID, now that I think about it, because we're passing in a whole book object, and the book object includes an ID property. So it's probably actually not.
Do we need to pass the whole book up?
As opposed to, sorry?
We can just pass the ID.
Well, we need the book object because we have to send the new values. We have to send the values that, all the values from the form.
We have to get back the values, but we don't need to send it to the Express controller.
We do because we want those new values to be recorded in MongoDB, not just the ID.
But if we just send the ID, it finds the book by ID and then edit the values and resend it to JSON object.
But we need to send the new values along with it.
Oh yeah,
We need to send the values that have been changed on the form, which is why we're sending the entire book object, because that now contains whatever the current form values are, which may or may not be different from what's in MongoDB, right? So I don't, if we do a put, well, probably a good idea to have the ID. It is descriptive. We're working with a particular document. I don't think it's actually required in this case. So we'll call JSON convert to a string our book. Yes. The ID property, because we're passing in the whole object. So now we'll need a put method in our API. Mongoose to run an update. So we can go to our API, and now we need our put. We'll use the Mongoose update method this time. So we're updating the document with this ID, and we just pass in the request body. So if we didn't, that's why we need to pass the whole object, right? Because it contains the new values. We use the same error handler. So we've written our 3 update functions. Now we should be able to try it out from our form. See if we can save a change.
But if I could create a function that containing that if error one and just call that function again.
Yeah, that'd be fine. Could do that. So something like so you do a student.
Even the
I have to think. I'm not sure if you could move that if. Whether it would know to pass, you probably could. But I'm not sure what the scope of this would be. Because the error is scoped to that callback. If you passed it, I think it would work. So now let's see if we can update something. So it did my update, cleared my form. It should be able to update any field in the book. And notice how fast it is, right? It's like the text changes automatically, seemingly. So that's kind of the real magic of Angular and writing all this extra code is how fast those updates, they look like they're real time, in effect, to the user. So they happen pretty much instantly. So there's our put. Our delete should be fairly simple because we just need well, we can write the delete method here. All we need to pass the delete method is an API, is the ID. We don't need to pass in the rest of the properties. But while we're here, we may as well write a delete. We'll get it right eventually. On delete, we can just call book.remove. I'll actually just copy the error handler into each. Sorry? It will probably return an empty array. Book would just represent an empty array. There won't actually be data there because, yes, we're removing that data. But we'll know we either get an error or an empty object coming back. So again, this is in our server controller. So if some other application wants to interact, if I'm a publisher and I've put this book in the store and I'm no longer selling it, I should be able to grab the ID and call a delete method to the API and delete it from the bookstore. So our service is going to have a delete method. It's going to be almost identical to select. We're just going to call it delete, and it runs an HTTP delete method. So the only difference between our select and delete is we called this method select, we called it one delete, and this one runs get, that one runs delete. And now our book component's going to need a delete call as well. That will do a delete, and then again we'll want to run get tasks, sorry, get books to remove the book from our list. So our delete book just needs an ID. So after we delete, we'll run our get method. We'll requery and repopulate our list. That book should disappear. Now, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my confirmation in here. Because when the button's clicked, we want to call this method. I'm not sure what happens. Well, I guess we could try it. We already have an on-click event here. So I'm not sure what happens if I write an angular click. If both will run or if one will cancel the other one out. I guess there's one way to find out. So we'll say click equals delete book. Our parameter is book underscore. Code into our component. So our component's written in TypeScript, but we can still write a regular JavaScript method inside it. So we can put an if statement and render a confirm box. Okay, well, I get my confirmation. That's good. Ah, except it still runs. So I think
Inside of delete the book, we can make a function.
yeah, well, inside, well, one option is we can just call delete. Inside of delete, before we do this, we can just write our confirmation here. If return confirm. So we'll just move this code to say return in this case. There. But TypeScript should still allow us to run this plain JavaScript function. It's now just being called in our component rather than in our view. We'll try that, and hopefully I won't delete another book. So if I delete, okay, good. So now our data is up to date. So now a user can manage all this data. They only have to load this page one time. Data is always current. Never reload. Page never reloads. Okay, we can add, we can edit, we can delete, we can view in real time. Now there are some other ways to do this. I mean, we talked about using observables in our service. Which they're already moving away from, even though Angular 2 has not been out very long. Even Angular 2 itself, I mean, they've now announced the release of a beta release of Angular 4. So changes fast. Probably if you came back to class next year this time, and I do the same lesson, I'm probably gonna be doing it completely differently. And everything I've learned this year will already be obsolete. Okay. So there's a lot to it. There's a lot to Angular. I certainly couldn't show you everything, but the goal was, I accomplished what I wanted to, which was to get a full stack application working right from Angular on the front end, right through to Mongo on the back end, where you could build a single page app. So this kind of stack in technology, if we had to build something simple, a single page application where the use has to be fast, this is a good choice. This technology stack will give us that. We maybe wouldn't want to build something super complicated with it, but something quick, accessible, that's going to work well, particularly on mobile devices. This is a good answer. And it's flexible because we still have our API in the back, which we could do other things with. So from an architecture perspective, having our controller with our JSON API is also a really good way to think about building out your web applications, because they give you all kinds of flexibility and scalability moving forward. Where our backend and our front end are two components that have our backend has no dependency on anything. This was pretty much all the code I wanted to do today. Are there questions from anybody before I push this up to Git?
With the routers, why do we use the next?
You actually don't need it at all. You could take it out entirely. If we took out all of the next, it's there in the event we want to do something else after, we then call next. So we have some function name like write to a log file, right? So here we would call next and then call that function. But if I take next out, nothing's going to, you're not going to see any difference. And in fact, in some of the newer versions, I know in Tom's class, you're seeing the syntax this way. And then if you look at Tom's repositories online, he's doing this. So he's doing, it is on the other side. Keep my. So that syntax works just as well. If you look at Tom's code samples, he's not even using next. And there's a shorthand for that callback function, the fat arrow function instead.
It's not better to use in this application because it's ES6.
You know what? It probably is.
It's not supported on on-prem.
Yeah, well, it's not in this is on the server end, so it wouldn't matter. So probably this is more correct. And if you see newer samples, they'll use this ES6 structure. It is more efficient, that fat arrow structure. I didn't get into it just because I figured there was enough new stuff with Angular. The back end is stuff we already knew that we wouldn't have to change. But if you look at Tom's repositories, when he gets into Angular, he's using this syntax. So the next isn't required. And in fact, using that callback structure is becoming this is becoming the standard.
You can use next to the default parameters, like you can use router.use and pass all the parameters here, and then call the next, and it will go to get. You don't have to define title and everything.
Yep, that's true. That is another way of doing it. I don't like the structure of that. I mean, it's efficient, but I find it's hard to follow when you have all of the different calls inside of one router function. But some developers prefer it.
You don't have to call in one function. You just define them below and then call next. It will go to each function.
Yep.
Passing the variables to the first one.
Yeah, that works too.
Are there sessions in Express or Angular?
Express, there's an NPM package called Express. Well, we used it, right, with Passport.
Do we have sessions?
Not built in, you have to use that Express session package for it.
Taking questions or helping right now, or is it?
Well, I'm still taking questions if there's any more questions on this.